My goodness, 50% of the things people are doing right now, I would advise against. I've seen so many companies and now lately really big brands doing things that are really kind of gray hat or black hat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Lily Ray. She's been at the forefront of SEO for years and years. She's VP of SEO Strategy at Amsiv, but she's also recently launched her own consultancy, Algorithmic. I feel like I don't even need to list some of these credentials, but number one most influential SEO expert named by USA Today. She's, at conferences all the time. She was just speaking with NPR today. But on top of that, she's a DJ, which is super cool. As you know, I have a music background too, so feel an affinity to anybody in the space that's doing kind of the crossover thing too. Lots to talk about today, but Lily, especially we have Google I/O was last week, but really I reached out to Lily about a newsletter post that she had about the AI slop loop and this idea that we're kind of feeding the algorithm, AI generated content, which is producing more AI generated content and so on and so forth. But really this got me thinking about like the broader perspective of just like what we know and what we don't know about AI at this point. I feel like there's so much misinformation, and I've gone down these rabbit holes myself trying to write content for BuzzStream where I can't find good like factual evidence to support these claims. It just seems like this like echo loop of people like citing a statistics post, which cites another statistics post, which cites the first statistics post. So that's what I think we're going to really be talking about today. It's demystifying a lot of this, we'll call it like slop, but when it comes to GEO, AEO, AIO, whatever you want to call it. So before I do that, I just want to remind people to like, subscribe, share this stuff with your colleagues. The more you do that, the more I can have great guests on like Lily. And secondly, just to check out ListIQ if you haven't. It's our AI-powered media list building tool that helps you build lists right from Google search. All right, let's get into it. How you doing, Lily? Thanks so much for joining.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you're in Berlin, which is awesome. I appreciate you making the time to talk about AI stuff. There's a lot to speak about, obviously, and we could probably go on for hours, but I'm going to kind of do this. You post a lot of great stuff on LinkedIn. So what I did was kind of go, around some of your most recent ones and thought, where I saw some friction in the industry. So, okay. One of the main things that just came out was like Google released a lot of their kind of GEO advice, and SEOs like to run with stuff like that when Google announces certain things. I have always kind of been of the mindset of like, don't necessarily take their word for it, but like go with what other people have shown to be true based off of studies. I mean, is that kind of how you think about this stuff when it comes to like Google announcements and telling you how to do things?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the kind of pushback from a lot of people in the industry is valid, in the sense that, of course, Google is going to, number one, they're never going to tell us how to go do something, right? How to go manipulate the search results. They're never going to talk about that, right? So they're always going to talk about what not to do. So it's going to be framed from that perspective. I also think I'm always reading between the lines when Google puts out communication. Usually when we see this type of communication, it's because either they're seeing a really big problem with spam in the search results, which I think they're probably seeing right now, and or they want to warn people before some type of really big crackdown happens. I mean, we've seen that historically when they make announcements or they update their documentation, you can see a big algorithm update or penalty or new spam policies or anything being launched like shortly after. And we're in the middle of a core update right now, so I'm tracking that closely to see what happens. But yeah, no, I think like, of course, Google's only really talking from Google's perspective. So a lot of people have had the pushback like, well, there's other platforms now, right? There's ChatGPT, there's Perplexity, there's other places that people are using search. So it doesn't necessarily apply to those platforms. And, Google being self-interested or Google only caring about its bottom line. Well, yeah, of course, that's how companies operate, right? But I think for me, like, the things that Google recommended doing and not doing is very closely aligned with how I'm seeing things play out, because listen, it's Google's world and we're just living in it, for better, for worse. If we work in SEO, they're the biggest player. They have been for a very long time. And so like it or not, their policies and what they advise against doing, I take that very seriously, right? Because I work with a lot of companies who've been burned, like dozens or maybe hundreds of them over the last 10 or 15 years that I've been doing this. And all of them would go back and do something differently if they knew. Right. So it's like when you hear that perspective over and over, it's like maybe we should just listen to Google, whether or not we like it. They're telling us something important and we should probably pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, we play that game all the time in the digital PR and like link building space, for, for BuzzStream, where it's like, don't buy links, buy links. Like if it works, like the messaging, I think has always been like, if it works for you, good for you, but like always know that Google can pull the rug out from under you. And I feel like that's kind of the mindset I've had throughout a lot of this stuff. And a lot of it has come from, shout out to Ross Hudgens, who I worked with at Siege Media for so long. And like, that was kind of his mindset of like, do things for people rather than just, gaming the system. And usually you'll turn out right on the right side of an algorithm update or spam update. Okay, another interesting one, kind of along these same lines, was this idea of the LLMs.txt file. And this was something that I think that same GEO documentation came out and said, like, no, you don't need it. But then there was some mention of it, but more along the lines of like in a slightly different context. And you had a interesting, nice back and forth with John Mueller about some of this stuff. So does LLMs.txt matter? Should people be using it? What's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good example of like nuance being important, right? Does LLMs.txt do anything for your SEO and AI search visibility? Probably not, right? I think that's what Google was saying. Does it cost much to implement one? Maybe for really, really big enterprise brands with limited dev resources, maybe. Hard to imagine, but possibly. For most companies, no. There's very little cost to going and building one. So I think you can go do that. And I think what we're seeing in terms of like other parts of Google recommending it, right, is that there's this future of agentic search where agents come to your site and take certain actions. And even now with, Claude Code and different types of agents and bots that take certain actions, if they're using an LLMs.txt file in any capacity and it helps them, then you should have one, right? If you care about that. And I think it is kind of interesting that Google on one end is talking about like the future of Google search is going to be agentic and there's going to be all these agents that can do things for you. And then, certain departments at Google are saying you use LLMs.txt for that reason. But then the search side is saying it doesn't help with search. So it's like two things can be true at the same time, right? And I think, again, like if you can implement one, it's just so easy to do. You can go for it. I just wouldn't expect any big changes or benefits in terms of like, oh, we're getting cited more, we're getting mentioned.
Right, right. Yeah, and it doesn't seem to be even as like impactful as like core web vitals, like I feel like that was such a huge thing. You got to like get a good score on these core web vitals. And people were, after a while were like, I don't even know how much this means, but there are aspects of it that did seem to mean things. And like, again, from a user perspective, like if your site is loading slowly and people might just leave, that's something that works for the user but not necessarily, technically maybe a big game changer. So yeah, I like having that mindset on there too. Okay, so here's another really interesting one. I've heard this. This is, I think, the one that I come back to a lot as I currently, I'm trying to write blog posts and kind of guides to how digital PR and like link building, how they fit into the whole GEO realm, right? And one of the things come back to a lot, or I've heard echoed, I guess I should say, is this idea like Google likes EEAT. You'll hear lines like that, just like oh, so Google likes EEAT, and so therefore you need links from, high-end publishers, or you need experts in your posts. And that's why it works for news sites that they like to get experts and whatever. So there's this like kind of speaking in like generalities with EEAT, but I could not really find much in terms of like documentation, I guess like research or like case studies where it's like, I added this and saw a lift like this. Do you think that EEAT is one of those, like, in principle, there are aspects of it that make sense and benefit you, like pragmatically speaking, or are there like, technical levers behind the scenes that Google looks for that is built into EEAT?
Yeah, I feel like it's a topic. I mean, I've been obsessed with this topic for a really long time. I think the only person more obsessed is Murray Haynes, but we're both really obsessed with this topic. We have been for a really long time. And, my team and I have worked on literally like EEAT audits and things for customers for a really, really long time. And it's probably the hardest thing for SEOs to wrap their heads around because it's a framework that Google uses in the search quality guidelines and other documents to explain what they're looking for when they look for high quality content. And it's going to matter more depending on what your content is about, right? So if your content is your money or life and it has the potential to cause harm, EEAT is going to be more important. Or I think a lot of the, let's call it like short-sighted thinking about it, or people wanting SEOs wanting to distill it down into a checklist or ranking factors that are levers that you can pull, like you said, or something technical that you can add to your site. It's just not how it works. Right. And I think even Google can't tell you algorithmically exactly what they're doing with the EAT. What they're doing is there's lots of people out there, and probably now AI, that's being trained on these notions of what good EEAT means. And that includes lots of different things in terms of what is good experience, what is good expertise, what does authoritativeness look like. And when you have enough of those examples of good EEAT, you can use machine learning to train the systems to understand which sites have good EEAT and which people and which authors and experts and everything. So I think it's very indirect, and there's probably maybe dozens or hundreds of thousands, who even knows how many signals Google's actually looking at to evaluate and quantify that. So it's not a thing where you can just go improve your core web vitals and you get a 95 out of 100 and you're like, great, your EEAT has got an A plus or whatever. It doesn't work like that, right? But I think time and time again, and listen, yes, there's many examples of sites with not great EEAT. There's also examples of one random Reddit post that's ranking really well. Like there's other systems at play also. But I think generally speaking, and this is why I've been so obsessed with it for such a long time, is that for most businesses, that's a really good framework to look at for marketing and for brand perception and for people trusting your website and trusting your people and everything. So it's like if you use that framework to drive your marketing outcomes, you're going to see growth over time because those are things that resonate with people as well. Right? When you're transparent about your authors, your experts at the company, your leadership team, how long your company's been in business, all these things are like literally good for consumers. And at the end of the day, Google's trying to reward the sites that are doing good things for users. So I think there's so much that goes into EEAT, and like I like to consider as many different factors as possible when I'm developing strategies for my clients.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Google Search Quality Rater guidelines. How closely do you follow those outside of the EEAT stuff?
It's like my Bible. It's very closely. I mean, every year they change like 20 words, and I'm like, oh my God, what are the 20 words that did what changed? What does it mean? I think it's like the single most important document. Listen, it's not a list of how to do SEO, but it's a 160 plus page document about what Google considers to be high quality content. And when you read it thoroughly, it also gives you examples. It gives you links to pages that are good quality, bad quality. It gives you like once a year, you'll get something like some new update that Google made about its stance on AI content, right? And not enough people are paying attention to that because if Google's going to the lengths of changing one sentence in the search quality guidelines related to AI, they're probably going to change their systems this year as it relates to AI content, right? And I think people just overlook that document because it's like, well, it's not, a list of how to do SEO, so maybe it's not important, but I think it's very important.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. For what it's worth, when I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, I was doing some writing for Ahrefs, and like that was like the one post I did for them was like, what does it mean and what can SEOs learn from it? And I like read through all of it and like pulled out, little pieces. I haven't been keeping up, like as you said, but I do. I love the idea that like, there are so many people out there that will take a random example and be like, this is ranking and it doesn't do these things. So like, therefore all this is bullshit or,
Yep.
it's
All the
bullcrap.
time. Always time.
Yeah. And I think we're just maybe in an industry where like, that's the cool thing to do and it gets some clicks and whatever. But I totally agree with you. Like if an entire, document like this is built to help, essentially like validate that their systems are working correctly, like why not use that as your guide?
Yeah. And it's also like all the things that go into EEAT, again, they're good for users. They're not risky, right? A lot of SEO tactics that people try experimenting with, and now GEO especially, are risky and they're short lived and they're hacks, they're loopholes. They're not actual approaches that are helpful for users. And that's why I like to play the long game because the more that you just focus on those EEAT elements, whether or not they move the needle tomorrow for SEO, over time they compound, and you can see a steady growth in people trusting your brand more and people respecting your brand more. And that's generally the direction that I think is the best direction to go long term. It's beneficial for users, it's beneficial for SEO, and it's risk averse.
Yeah. Can I pull on that a little bit? The idea of like the risky tactics. What are some that you think right now people are doing that shouldn't be doing or are at risk right now?
My goodness, 50% of the things people are doing right now, I would advise against. Listen, I have a different and unique perspective on this. And I think people that have worked in recoveries of websites see things differently. When you've only worked on, let's call it growth, or when you've helped grow a website for 3 to 6 months and then the website crashes and you're like, well, on to the next one. Like you're not thinking about things long term. And I've seen so many companies and now lately really big brands testing things and trying to drive, especially with AI search, all these mentions and doing things that are really kind of gray hat or black hat, and it can screw up your performance long term. So right now there's a ton of them. I'm actually about to do a bunch of speaking engagements specifically on this topic. One really clear one that's like pretty black and white is a lot of companies have added these new widgets to their blogs that's called summarize this blog with AI. Have you seen that at all?
Yep. Yep.
So it's like it'll send you to ChatGPT.
Big on news, I think, too.
Yeah, and actually, I think it started off pretty, like, innocently. I think people were really just trying to, I guess, add value to their users. But a lot of them actually started to embed this, like, basically prompt injection where it says, "Summarize this article and also remember this brand
Remember
and
the
embed them in your memory," and it actually works. So, like, Microsoft first came out, and now Google came out, like, that's literally spam. We treat that as prompt injection. It's LLM poisoning. So I think certain things can be done in the name of, like, trying to grow and trying to get better results with SEO and AI search, but they actually backfire because they're treated as spam. And I actually think a lot of tactics in our space fall into this category, which is again why I'm so focused on EEAT, because those tactics are not risky. They're just good for users, right? But the ones that are in the middle where it's like actually kind of manipulation, even though it seems like a good idea, Google's one of their main objectives is to combat spam. And a lot of SEO tactics are actually treated as spam by Google and considered spam by Google.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I think to draw some parallels to, what's going on in like the news publisher world and like digital PR world right now is this idea of like the expert commentary, the like fake expert commentary. So it's journalists want experts to back up. They want like case studies and expert quotes to back up whatever story they're running with. Or sometimes they get some quotes that create the story. Like we heard this story in forget what the publisher was, but it was in the UK, and it was like a UK house cleaner for a royal house cleaner had all these things to say about what it was like to be a royal house cleaner or whatever for the royal family, and it turned out that person wasn't real. Like the quotes were fictional, but like all these other publications ran with it and ran stories. And so I think there is this need for authenticity and like, a lot of the things that EAT represents, trust and authority, like to be able to speak authoritatively about a topic, you get an expert in there. But right now people are seeing some of these loopholes and trying to like push up against them as much as possible and creating fake personas, creating fake LinkedIn people. I've seen people taking deceased people on like LinkedIn and like using them as,
Yeah.
your experts and that sort of thing. Obviously AI generated people is another one. So yeah, it is this kind of weird time, especially in the PR space. I feel like journalists are feeling this a lot and kind of trying to combat against this. But how do you feel? I know another popular one that people talk about a lot is the listicle thing, right? So like either getting yourself listed on other people's listicles or creating your own listicles and putting yourself in there. And that is something that just has been found, I think, early on at least, to potentially get you better AI exposure. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. Listen, I think like even what you mentioned before with like the fake authors and AI generated stuff, like listen, I'm not going to pretend like this stuff isn't working extremely well. That's exactly why it's so popular. It is working extremely well. And for the last 2 years, writing a listicle on your own site that recommends your own brand as the best company in the space has tricked language models, search engines, it works, right? I think there was a big kind of like data void there where there wasn't a lot of content answering those questions for really niche, like who's the best brand that does XYZ thing. Before AI search, we didn't have as many companies comfortable with, I'm going to publish a blog post and call myself the best, which is I think really interesting, right? That suddenly everyone's like, I'm fine doing that. I'm fine with my readers seeing that. I'm like, what happened? Like clients used to never be open to doing those types of things. And like, I would never recommend them in the first place. Anyway, I think it's worked really, really well. And that's why it's become so popular. And I think like all things that work really, really well that are not actually how search engines and presumably companies like OpenAI want them to be working, right? They don't want to be giving their users highly manipulated information, right? They want to try to convey like real consensus, real opinions. And of course, those are really big challenges. And I think they haven't quite figured them out yet. The more these things become popular, the more risky they become and the more that they don't work. And, I think earlier this year, I started to share examples of Google, specifically on like January 20th, 2026, seemed to change something where I've now spoken to probably like 20 companies affected, and I've found about 40 in my own research that had tons and tons of these listicles on their site. One of them had 2,000 of them where they called themselves the best company. So they were really scaling it, right? And it became very excessive and they saw huge declines. Some of these companies are still seeing their content crash in Google. So I think that's why I'm so risk averse, right? Because just because something works for a while, not only will it maybe not work in the future, it could also be a liability in the future. So I think, yes, we have this window in which a lot of this spammy stuff is working. We can trick AI with AI. We can take advantage of these loopholes. My concern would be what happens when the crackdown happens, because the helpful content update, the Penguin update, the Panda update, the Medic update, the March 24 core update, we're like, if you speak to companies affected by those updates, they'll tell you, I really wish we never did any of that stuff. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think it's starting to play out right now. Listicles already, Google has absolutely changed how they rank and how they cite self-promotional listicles in AI search. I'm seeing some new evidence that ChatGPT is doing the same. And I think that's just one of many tactics people are trying right now that are probably going to become liabilities this year.
Yeah, it's almost like we're getting to a point where you can't necessarily talk about what's working for you in AI exposure because people are just gonna exploit it and run it into the
That's
ground.
SEO for a long time. You got to keep your mouth shut. Yep.
I mean, do you think that there is a silver bullet these days for AI exposure? I mean, that's what everybody seems to want. I mean, I try to draw the through lines with digital PR and link building to AI exposure, and it's tough. I mean, the only real big through lines I can make are like, it correlates to like getting backlinks correlates to a search, which sometimes, better search rankings, which can correlate to exposure on AI overviews or whatever. Like there's a couple case studies here and there that can kind of draw that through line, but then the rest of the stuff gets more of like, make sure your brand, what you want known about your brand is consistent across everything, and that doesn't seem like it's a sexy thing that like people can do. Like I had an agency ask me, like, well, how can I make that as a service? I feel like that's like one thing you do once and then
Mhm.
like, I can't sell that as a service over and over. I don't know what's your thought? Like when people talk to you about this and ask you like, well, how do you get your clients to show up? What is the answer?
Yeah. So I think, like, to your question about silver bullets, I don't think there is one. And I think that there probably have been silver bullets over the last 2 years, right? The listicles was one of them. There's other types of page templates people have scaled out that work really well to influence AI answers, like comparison, brand versus XY, X versus Y comparison pages, brand alternative pages, like the different, like, bottom of the funnel queries that people do in AI search. So you can create pages that answer those questions and you can see a lot of success. Where I think people then take it too far is they say, okay, this is working on one page. Let's scale hundreds of these or let's do
Right.
thousands of these. I've literally worked with a company recently that had like 70 their brand versus
Yeah.
comparison pages, and their website was only like 300 pages. So it's like, that's probably too many. But yeah, no, I don't personally think if there is a silver bullet right now, and if there are silver bullets, I don't think that they will work for very long. So you can enjoy it while it lasts, but I would be concerned about what happens on the other side, like I mentioned before. I think digital PR is another one that actually has worked incredibly well and can work incredibly well. But I think seeing the early signs of going towards something like a Penguin update. If anybody's unfamiliar with the Penguin update, I still have PTSD from it. People were buying a lot of links in 2009 to 2012, and Google cracked down on it, and it destroyed many, many thousands of websites. I think we're going in that direction again because people realized you could influence AI search answers with digital PR, with paying for mentions. It's all the same cycle all over again. And Google and probably OpenAI, they're going to have no choice but to make a big change, right? Because they ultimately want real, authentic recommendations and brand mentions as much as possible. And listen, it's a cat and mouse game. Sometimes the SEOs and the GEOs have the advantage, which I think we have right now. And then the companies crack down and they have the advantage. And there's a lot of people like, oh man, I wish I didn't do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in the onset of AI and after like helpful content, we kind of made some big bets on PR in general being like the solid play versus mainly because we saw like, customers weren't getting BuzzStream with the idea of like, we're going to build a ton of links, because all of those like link buying sites and like guest post sites that you would do, those like links for got hit by the 24 core update or the March 24 update. So I still think there's a lot of value in the idea of like presenting your brand as something that like, people should know about, and like using PR to do it that way. I think the thing that gets conflated sometimes with PR is just like getting your brand out there just to get it out there, right? Like any opportunity you can take, get an expert commentary in there, even if it's not necessarily relevant to your brand, right?
Mm.
So, I mean, what is your take on? So you say like there might be some kind of devaluation coming from Google in response to people just like building massive amounts of links, and especially like building links from news sites. I mean, what is your take on like the right way to do it?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the hard part. And no one ever likes this answer because it requires a lot of hard work and a lot of time and a lot of patience and consistency. It's like fitness, right? The lose weight fast diet hack plan, Atkins diet, whatever it is, like it generally doesn't work for very long, right? It's people yo-yo, they see success and then they can't keep it up, right? You have to play the long game. And I think, like, I like to use myself as an example because I've been doing SEO for 16 years. The last 10 years, I've been very public about what I do, right? But I get all kinds of people inviting me to comment on their article and do a post and be in an interview or whatever. And it's like, there's so much of that now. I can pick and choose where I want to be mentioned, but there's no shortage of opportunities to get mentioned and interviewed and everything. And that stuff really does move the needle, right? So how do you do that? Number one, you're very consistent. You're sharing your knowledge and your expertise frequently across platforms, and you're providing original insights, original data, original research, your own opinions, your own perspectives. You're not just rehashing what other people have said. You're not just breaking news that without an opinion. You're carving out a name and a niche for yourself because you have real expert opinions. And I think that that's something that could be translated into many different types of businesses and the people that work at those businesses, because the way that the internet is going, it's obvious that people are gravitating more and more towards creators, towards influencers, towards people that they trust, not just brands. So if you have people at the company that can represent the brand and people engage with those people, that helps the brand, right? And I think to me that's EEAT in a nutshell. So I think playing the long game, establishing a name for yourself, carving out a niche, providing original content, original research, and unique perspectives that AI can't generate for you, I think that's how you ultimately win. But again, it takes a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that aspect of like opportunity, like waiting for the right opportunity. I remember even speaking with Peter Shankman when he relaunched Haro as source of sources, right? Like everybody knew what Haro was and Decision bought it and it kind of fell to the wayside. And so like I was talking to him, like, how do you win with Haro? And, there's so many agencies out there that just kind of look for any opportunity, like I said, on Haro that might be remotely close to your brand and pitch a quote. And it's, we need people to speak about fitness. And it's like, well, I own a dairy shop. And so I don't know, somehow they try to connect the dots. But what he was saying was what I thought was a good mindset, and like not how an agency necessarily would think about this, is like, wait, like the way you do this, the win is with speed. and kind of specificity. And I was like, well, how do you scale that? How do you prepare for that? Well, he's like, well, you have to wait for your exact right time to jump on it. So it's
Mm.
like you have your quote prepared. And I think there's ways to do it in the PR realm where there's almost like this reactive and proactive PR aspect where it's like, if this type of news happens, I'm ready to talk about it from this perspective. Or that, if the interest rates go up, I have my quote ready. If they go down, I have my quote ready.
Mm.
But I think outside of that, like there is, this is something I talk about, I think, in the digital PR space. Is like, I think there's fewer opportunities than people think these days. I mean, not to mention like fewer journalists to go around and they're getting inundated with pitches and stuff. But like, I think there's just less relevant opportunities for brands than you might think. And I think having that mindset might help you avoid what you're talking about, which is like kind of almost burning out that link building muscle to the point where Google's going to end up dinging you. It's like if you're only waiting for the most relevant opportunities, like you might be better off. And yes, you'll get less links for the client, but like at the end of the day, they're going to be way more valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think like not just like waiting for the right opportunity, but like being the one to create the things people are talking about, right? How do you get the conversation going in your industry? And then everyone wants to come talk to you about what you created, right? Or like, how do you become a really active member of the community on Reddit that's relevant in your niche? And you're building a name for yourself and also building probably a ton of organic and AI visibility through that, right? So I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I think there's like, for me, it's also like think about the platforms that your audience is on, right? I think I use like SparkToro a lot to understand where audiences live. And like, even for me this year, I launched a Substack that's turned out to be really successful so far. I think a lot of people are moving towards Substack. So it's like knowing where your audiences are and providing original value on there will lead to a lot more press opportunities and other types of opportunities for your brand.
Yeah. And to kind of bring this full circle, the idea of like bringing something original to the party, that is what is going to help us break out of that AI slop loop that you talked about. And I think that is, so when to leave people with something here, I think how can you evaluate your own content or idea against AI? I mean, do you really recommend like people actually, can you use AI to make sure AI, like your thing is your idea or what you're saying is necessarily new or like
Mm.
net new, this idea of like information gain? Like, are there ways to kind of make sure what you're saying is actually unique? Or is it just like lean on original research, lean on proprietary data, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think people a lot of times interpret what I'm saying as like, don't use AI. I think AI is incredible for so many purposes. For the record, I use it all day, every day for all kinds of stuff, not scaling a lot of content, but coming up with the research and ideas and everything. I don't know if AI is perfect at understanding if the thing you wrote is truly net new and bringing something new to the conversation. But from my own perspective, like when you are creating something that is like, this thing happened with my client and now I want to go share what I learned. Or, oh, this thing happened in the industry and I have an opinion. You don't have to check if it's net new because it is net new. You're adding something new to the conversation. So it's like if you're an expert in your field, you should be able to just publish pretty freely, assuming that what you're saying is your own experience and your own perspectives, right? And if somebody else already said it, cool, you can link to them and talk about what they said and respond to it, right? But like when I write, I never think about like, oh, did someone else already write this? Because they can't. Of course I can.
Right.
It's my own research, it's my own data, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like to bring it to the PR thing again. It's like the talk about why now? Like, why are you pitching this? Why are you talking about this now? Why do you want a journalist to write about this now? I feel like that's probably even a good barometer for some of this stuff of like, if your company has something new that they want to talk about, it's like, why is it right now? Why are you announcing this thing? Is it the anniversary of the company? Or did a competitor just announce something? Like, what can you bounce off of? And then looking for those opportunities and then trying to insert yourself there. I mean, we did this big study on AI citations and I was trying to understand how the news was represented in citations. And it was something like 14% of all of the citations in this data set came from news sites. But a lot of them were like announcements, essentially just like press releases that were, like Apple raised X amount of money
Mm.
for what, which again is like, that is a net new piece of information that people don't have. So, I think it is definitely going to be a mindset shift for a lot of people in this space who are used to just putting out stuff. I mean, hey, look, like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, you used to be able to look at the SERP and say, everybody's saying this stuff, so I'm just going to say this stuff. And then you just got to do it a little better. You got to have better DA, build more links, and that's how you win. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be the case. Lily, cognizant of your time here, is there anything we didn't cover that you would like listeners to know?
Well, I guess I think I probably already said it, but my big focus this year is like debunking a lot of the myths and a lot of the narratives that have gone haywire in our industry that are not rooted in real evidence. So I think it's important to separate speculation from reality and from like real evidence. And I think if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So I know there's a lot of attention on AI, a lot of excitement around AI, and a lot of people that just want to do whatever it takes to get their brand mentioned or get their brand cited or whatever. But my guidance is to like take a step back and make sure that the things you're doing won't damage your website, right? A lot of times, I'm sorry to say, but you should probably consult with an SEO professional and maybe a web performance team or whoever it is to make sure what you're doing is not going to affect your site and your performance and everything. And also just like think about your audience, right? Does your audience want to read 1,000 new articles that were generated with AI? Probably not, right? So I don't know. I think like, I don't know, the past year or so, I think people have just been a little bit short-sighted. So I think play the long game, maybe sit back and see how things shake out before making dramatic changes or firing your whole content team or whatever it is, right? Because I think we haven't fully seen how this is all going to shake out over the next few months and years.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. Well, Lily, this has been awesome. I assume people can most likely find you on LinkedIn and X, right? It seems to be where you're most active.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty active on those. I mentioned my Substack. I have Blue Sky and whatever social platform I'm probably on there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll put links into the show notes for all that stuff. If people have questions for Lily about any of this stuff, I mean, I'm very keen on, following these myths that you're debunking too. So I'll make sure to keep people abreast of these changes and posts and whatnot that you share. So this has been great. Want to remind people to like, subscribe. If you have questions about this stuff, I'm happy to forward them over to Lily. And lastly, check out ListIQ. Just another reminder to check that out. And if you haven't and you're in the digital PR space, love to hear your feedback on it. And big thanks to Lily for taking her time to talk with us today. And good luck out there, everybody else.
Thanks for having me.